I was born in Detroit in 1980, and my mother brought me home to Herman Gardens. We were poor, that is part of the record, but poor is a financial condition. It is not a child's name, character, intelligence, or destiny. My beginning did not look like the beginning of a king. There was no palace, no inheritance, no family corporation waiting for my name. There was a young mother trying to make a home with what she had, a young father trying to become more than his circumstances, and a baby who knew nothing about the pressure already waiting in the room. My parents did not have a polished beginning. They had public assistance, uncertain work, old arguments, young hopes, and more pressure than planning. They were not married, but I believe there was real love between them. Love was present. So were the problems love could not solve by itself. Why begin with the money? Because money was never only money. Money decided how far we could travel, how long an adult could remain patient, whether a broken object was a small inconvenience or a family emergency, and how often pride had to negotiate with necessity. Define the economic problem for the record. My family did not begin at zero. We began behind zero. My mother had not completed high school. She would not earn her diploma until she was in her 40s. The work available to her included fast food, babysitting, daycare, and home health care. Necessary work that served other families but did not always provide enough security for her own. That is an important distinction. Poverty is often described like a person made one bad choice and received one bad result. Real poverty can operate like a loop. Limited education narrows the jobs available. Low wages make reliable transportation harder to obtain. Without reliable transportation, a worker cannot reach every job, accept every shift, or recover easily when a child gets sick. Each limitation strengthens the next one, so effort alone does not break every loop. Correct, effort matters, personal responsibility matters, but ethics requires an honest description of the starting position. If two people are told to run the same race while one begins several laps behind, calling the rules equal does not make the opportunity equal. Nothing by that name. But children study economics before they can spell it. What did the child know about economics? To the system, the child is a data point in a growing grid. They notice when the refrigerator is full. They notice when adults whisper over bills. They notice who has a car, who needs a ride, who gets the new toy, and who learns not to ask. Nobody had to sit me down and announce that resources were limited. I could see the evidence. Juice was poured to a certain line. Cereal had to last. Leftovers were not an option you rejected because you were bored. A trip to the store required a list, transportation, timing, and arithmetic. Sometimes the lesson was not hearing the word no. It was learning to silence the request before anybody had to answer it. That can make a child considerate. It can also make him believe that having needs creates trouble for other people. That matters to the case. A child who learns not to ask may become a man who waits too long to explain what he needs. Then, when he finally speaks, years of quiet can come out with the force of an alarm. Understanding that pattern does not excuse the alarm. It tells us where to begin examining it. State the difference between context and excuse. An excuse says, my history made me do it, so I owe nobody accountability. Context says, my history trained this response, so now I know what must be examined, corrected, and retrained. One closes the case, the other gives the case somewhere useful to go. Accountability decides what happens next. Transportation was another kind of power. A person with a dependable car controlled distance. A person without one negotiated with weather, schedules, transfers, favors, and patience. To a child, a missed bus can feel like the whole city has decided not to cooperate. From that window, I saw several Detroits at once. I saw people working. I saw people waiting. I saw businesses with bright signs asking for our money. I saw neighborhoods where everything looked maintained and neighborhoods where people had to create beauty themselves. Before I knew the word entrepreneur, I recognized the person who could turn a skill into value. The barber sold more than a haircut. He sold confidence. The cook sold more than a plate. She sold relief. To somebody too tired to prepare dinner. The mechanic sold movement. Even children understood exchange. One toy, two favors, a turn with the good ball. Every playground had a market, and every market had rules. Were the rules fair? For many children in the playground, the answer was found in the trade. Not always. That was another lesson. The person with the most could set the price. The person who controlled access could decide who belonged, and the person desperate to participate might agree to terms he knew were wrong. I became interested in the rule behind the game. Why did owning one object give somebody control over everybody else's afternoon? Why did the children accept it? What would be a fair trade? I did not call those questions business ethics. I was simply a boy trying to understand power. Then teach the rule. Authority is responsibility. Then teach the rule of power for the record. Authority is responsibility. Ownership creates power, but power does not automatically create fairness. A legal price can still be exploitative. A voluntary agreement can still be distorted when one person controls something everybody else needs. Business ethics begins where "I am allowed to do this" meets the harder question, what does doing this cause? Apply that to the household. Adults controlled the home, the money, the transportation, and the information. The child controlled almost nothing. Therefore, the adults carried the greater duty. Authority is not merely permission to decide. Authority is responsibility for the person who must live with the decision. The more control a person holds, the greater their duty to consider the impact on people with less control. My first classroom was the household. The lesson was simple. Every decision costs something, and the smallest person in the room often pays without being consulted. Then what should a family, business, or institution do differently? First, identify who has the least voice but carries the greatest consequence. Second, distinguish a true necessity from a convenient decision made by the powerful. Third, explain the decision honestly. And fourth, create a path for the affected person to be heard without punishment. Identify impact, test necessity, explain honestly, provide a voice. It does not measure the effort of the parent or the future waiting beyond the current numbers. A court can use it before imposing a condition. A spouse can use it before making a decision that changes both lives. The settings change. The ethical question remains. Who had the power, who carried the cost, and was the person carrying the cost allowed to speak? But poverty did not own the imagination. When the room was small, imagination made it larger. A blanket became a command center. A cardboard box became a vehicle. A pencil could build the business, machine, or world that money could not yet purchase. A pencil could build the business, machine, or world that money could not yet purchase. Is that where King Joseph began? Authority is not merely permission to decide. Authority is responsibility, not as a title, as a survival method. The boy learned that if the world handed him a limitation, his mind could study it, rename it, and search for another use. He could not control the household budget. He could imagine systems that worked better. That is why I refuse to use poor as an insult. It does not measure the love in the home, the intelligence of the child, the effort of the parent, or the future waiting beyond the current numbers. It does not measure the effort of the parent or the future waiting beyond the current numbers. Final finding for Chapter 1. Scarcity can teach discipline, creativity, and gratitude. It can also teach fear, silence, urgency, and the belief that there will never be enough. The same childhood can produce both strengths and wounds. Maturity is learning which lesson is helping you build and which lesson is still controlling you. Scarcity shaped Joseph's questions, but it did not define his worth. Before we discuss the man, preserve this image of the boy, watching, calculating, imagining, and learning that every system reveals its ethics by what happens to the person with the least power. Before we discuss the man, preserve this image of the boy, watching, calculating, imagining,